All right, we're back and ready to make some wine. And if we use our usual format, the history of wine is the same as the history of beer, same as the history of cheese. Everybody starts 10,000 years ago. That's when people started living on riverbanks and getting pandemics and stuff. And in the 20th century, you remember Pasteur and Latour. Latour is the one that discovered organisms in wine. Pasteur refined it, and it basically, the name, as you recall, Saccharomyces, this one's anus, the enzymes that they have in Greek means in yeast. So that the last time we were talking about the name, and the enzymes we have here can use simple sugars, glucose, fructose, and can use disaccharides. It can use maltose and sucrose. And simple sugars was glucose and fructose, so I got that backwards. So, and Homer, if you remember your history, 700 BC, pretty much said that wine, or during his period, wine was a staple. In fact, in Greece, it means to breakfast. That means they made, in the old days, they made a strong wine and they diluted it down and give it to the queens and more diluted to the free men and then slaves or whoever drank the stuff. And it literally means to drink undiluted wine. So think of the Romans. One reason it went well. They're drinking this undiluted wine every morning if you're 3 years old or 50 years old. We're a little more civilized now. We're going to make our wine in a jug, and you're going to know exactly the percent alcohol. So much for the history. Remember that we're going to post a protocol, and I'm glad we waited because I've changed this protocol 3 times, and I think it's exactly right. We're going to make 2 wines today. We're going to make watermelon wine, Tom T. Hall. Everybody knows Tom T. Hall. Watermelon wine. And then we're going to make peach wine. Peach puree.
Puree.
Okay, I have assistants that do the enunciation in the auditing section of this. And so we know, now one thing we do know, I'm hopping ahead because we're going to do the watermelon wine first. This peach stuff is pretty expensive. I forget what we paid for 3 pounds of this. So if you want to try peach, go buy the, I don't know, Piggly Wiggly. That's a good place. Buy a gallon of peach halves in there. Blend them up. Filter out the peach stuff, and you can make 5 gallons. This only makes 3 gallons. So do the same thing. We'll talk about that in a minute. And so now what we're going to do, we're going to cut this watermelon, and we need, ideally, we're going to make 1 gallon, and ideally we need about 3 pounds. We're going to see how that works. I bought this a few weeks ago, and as you know, watermelons are heavy, but the rind on a watermelon may be that thick. So I don't know how much we're going to get, so we're going to cut this sucker without, holy smokes. If this was a real good watermelon, in the old days, it would pop open. So that tells you that this is a store-bought watermelon, probably grew in somewhere in California. Hold on, let me move this a minute. And I don't know, it's not bad. Cold, tasty. I got to get all this out. You notice it's got seeds in it. And we're going to squeeze it in this bucket. When we get it out, we're going to sift out the seeds, and we're going to put it in another container, and that's going to, we know the tare weight, so that's how we're going to know the weight of this thing. Watch it. This is a sloppy thing. We didn't think this out too good, but we are going to squeeze the juice out of this. Whew, it's cold. Right here. All right, we going? Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to introduce you to, hold on, a funnel. And this is a 3-liter plus jug, which we are counting as a gallon. We have weighed out 1628 grams of squeezed watermelon juice.
Which is about 3 pounds.
Which is about 3 pounds, and it's going to fit your. So we're going, when you get this, we're going to have watermelon, and we're going to show you all of the stuff we're going to add in here. But first of all, we're going to make sure I don't break this funnel. She's going to hold this. We've already screened this out. No, I'm just checking. And you might have to lift that up a little bit to get an air, because it's tight. You ready? I'm gonna let her rip then. Oh, there went the watermelon. I knew it. It's gonna plug it up. Just hold on a minute. I'm gonna get out my fingers. Look at that.
They plugged it up. Go in and get it.
Okay. Well, it's going by. Come on. So I'm going to carefully put this over here. And of course, I'm stuck with washing the dishes. That's part of our deal here. We're splitting this course. All right. So how do you? No, never mind.
Do you need help?
No. I can't mention this. Now, so we're gonna add several ingredients to that. It's going to be on your protocol. I'm going to go. I've already weighed out each one of them, and I'm going to hold them up as we're. Let's see. Can I get all of these in there? Yes. And I'll tell you what they do for us. So we're going to wind up probably going to add some more artesian water in here to get it up to about here after we get through. But first of all, we're going to start off with yeast nutrients. We kind of touched on that last time, but yeast nutrients is basically your minerals and stuff that yeast produce, and they produce vitamins and everything else. And we're supposed to weigh 1 tablespoon per gallon, and it turns out we changed that to grams. So we're weighing out 3 grams of yeast nutrients. Pretty simple. I'm going to shake it each time so that we know that we're getting it all dissolved. And the second thing we're going to add is something called liquid wine tannin. Tannin. This is a special. It's 1 tablespoon of this, it's a liquid, for white wine, and he wants 2 tablespoons per, no, teaspoons. Come on, get away from the tablespoon, that's a capital. Teaspoons. So white wine gets 1, red wine gets 2. We've got watermelon, which is neither red or wine, so we're going to split the difference. We're going to put some of this tannin in there. Good gosh, I don't have room. You notice that it's a liquid, and we're going to just pour it in there. Wine tannin. The next one is going to be something called Camden tablets. Remember, Camden tablets are the name of is potassium metasulfite. And what this does, this acts sort of like hops did in the beer. It's going to kill things that they don't want. So we took the tablets, ground them up, and we added, let me see, we added 3 grams, where am I at? Right here. That we weighed it. It's 110 milligrams of this in a tablet. So we added 100 milligrams per 1 gallon of Camden tablets. And that is this right here. So we got the Camden tablet in there. Next, we're going to add pectin enzymes. This is called a pectinase. It's going to break up that pectin that's found in the fruit, in the watermelon tissue. And so we're going to add pretty good cooking of this pectin, 3 grams. It's a pretty good slug of stuff. Whoops, get in there. Pectinase. We're going to stir that around. How am I doing?
Pretty good.
Now, you want the pH corrected. So what we do, we buy something called acid blend, and we're going to waste, that goes in, sometimes it goes into beer and wine, and it's a mixture of 2 acids, malic acid, tartaric acid. You've heard of both. They're 4-carbon organic acids. And we're going to weigh out the, we want to add, they don't tell you here, but your overall recipe tells you 2.5, nope, that's the next one, acid blend. I forget, I'm going to look this one up. Acid blend, 2.5 grams. Perfect. And a lot of stuff in this thing. And the last thing, potassium sorbate. We're going to put this in there because this also does the same thing hops does in beer. It prevents fermentation when sweetened. It's a stabilizer, and it also controls the growth of the yeast. And we're putting in potassium sorbate, 2.5 grams. Now, that just about does it. We're going to stir this around. Notice that I got to add some water. I want to get water up to here, and then it would be time to pitch. But here's the dilemma. I'm looking down in here. This has been here maybe an hour. I can see some bubbling.
And what is that?
That's the yeast growing. They're using something in there and producing CO2 and water. It's bubbling. I don't know for sure how strong it's going to be, so I'm going to wait a while. We won't show you when we pitch it. But if this doesn't pick up strength, I have grown up that yeast in 10 ml amounts. If I'm going to shake it up, and I'm going to dump in, these is 48 hours I put in an incubator. I'm going to dump in a couple cubes of that. If you notice that when yeasts grow, That's yeast in there, and it's in 48 hours it grew, and it settles out. So what you have to do is use your finger to put a centrifuge, and then it gets re-suspended. So we got two options on the pitching. So we're not going to show you that, but we're going to give this a chance. If this works, we're going to dump that in there. If it don't work, we're going to dump that in there. So that will be the end of our...
Will any kind of vessel work for when they're doing the wine? They can pick anything that they want to put it in?
I like this one because you don't want light hitting it, and these colored jugs keep the light waves from going in there. So if you're going to do it in a clear jug, you want to do it in the dark. We're going to do this at room temperature, and we're going to monitor it, and we're going to have a water trap we put on top of there. So I'm going to hold on for a little while. So I'm just going to put a cap on this, and so we're going to get your protocol finally corrected, retype it, and we will put this online in a few days. Okay, an update on our wine process. This was our peach wine, a whole 5 gallons of this stuff. This is a rebatch of peach wine. I'll explain in a minute why. If you notice that it's bubbling and doing fine. This one is our watermelon wine. It blew the top off, and so sometimes when you blow the top off, they tell you to incubate it overnight with it open because it's just going to blow all over the place. And then tomorrow I'll put a water thing on it. Now, while we're on the subject, we have a protocol online that needs to be edited. Somehow or another, we got potassium sorbitol. And potassium sorbitol is not intended for the first batch. You add potassium sorbitol way after when you rack the wine and you don't want any wild organisms growing in your wine, you put potassium sorbate. So that's the reason I don't think we can reclaim this. I've tried putting new starter culture. It's not going to work. We just so on your protocol, scratch out potassium sorbate if you're making this at home. Racking our peach wine and our watermelon wine. So what we're doing, we took some clean 32-ounce mason jars. We're making a screen out of it to catch most of the lumps.
Cheesecloth.
Cheesecloth is what I'm trying to say. And it looks like we're going to do the second racking. I'm going to carefully try to pour this out without stirring up the bottom. Notice that the color is a nice color. It still, even though we're straining it, it still has some turbidity in it that we're hoping by secondary fermentation stuff to go on and let this clear up a little bit on the next racking. Now, I about made a mess of mine. We've changed the filter, and we're still trying to carefully rack. Whoa, now, why? Oh, I see what we're doing. Racking this. This is called, what we're going to do after this, we're going to store it in the dark. And that's starting to act like a mess there now. Maybe next time we just have one layer. But there is a secondary fermentation is called, there's a 4-carbon organic acid called malate that the organisms can still use and degrade that to get it out of there. The malate gives it a little bit of a twang that we don't want. So
we're going to let this ferment.
So we're going to let it ferment and then rack it again. At some point after we get through racking and letting it settle out like we want, we're going to age it a little bit. We'll probably sample it before you do to see how Well, it changed. So I'm going to change this filter again. This is going to get boring here. Can you see that in here? We're hoping we can filter out all that. Let's try it.
Ooh, looks nasty. Yeah, you want to pour slow so you don't.
Watermelon wine. Young kids, old dogs, watermelon wine. Hold on now.
You're fine, keep going.
Tell me when.
Stop.
All right. Okay, so far so good. This is going to go a little bit better. Look, notice the color. I think it's a nice color.
Mm.
And I'm going to take this off and go over here and do another one. This is the second. Yeah. This is secondary fermentation where we got the first
Rack.
off. We're going to put those in the dark and wait, see if it settles out again. If it settles out again, we'll re-rack it, and probably at that stage we'll put some potassium sorbate in it to keep anything else from growing, and we're going to wait until it gets ready to sip.